You're my life's biggest mistake, Mom shouted, wishing I was aborted after my exam fail. Dad's disgusted glare added, You'll never amount to anything. So I vanished. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you were stepping onto a stage where your failure was the only script ever written for you? I was 18. I came home from college with a paper in my hand that felt like a loaded gun. One failed exam, one letter, an F, red as blood. But I already knew it wasn't about the grade. My mother always knew when I brought bad news, like a predator sensing fear. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. Her silence cut sharper than shouting. She took the paper, her fingers trembling, but not from sadness, from the thrill of confirmation. Proof, finally, that I was the mistake she always suspected I was. And then she said it, with the calm precision of someone who'd practiced the line for years. You should never have been born. I wish every single day that I had aborted you. And I remember vividly turning to my father. Not for rescue, but just for something. His eyes met mine for the briefest moment, empty, cold. And then he looked back at his phone. I don't remember what happened after, just the taste of metal in my mouth, the sound of my own heartbeat, and the sudden permanent understanding that I was alone. That was 5 years ago. I haven't seen or spoken to them since. But then, 2 days ago, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. My father's voice. Trembling. Choked with something that almost sounded like regret. Or maybe it was just age catching up with cruelty. Either way, I haven't listened to it. Yet. But I'm going to. Right now. With you. And before I press play, I want to tell you the whole story. Because maybe then you'll understand why I don't know if I can forgive them. And why some apologies come far, far too late. The litany of my failures, my inherent flaws, my crushing disappointments echoed in the sterile kitchen. Each accusation a fresh nail, hammered into the coffin of my self-worth. My mother's voice, no longer a chilling monotone, had risen to a shrill, grating crescendo. She paced the small space like a caged animal, her movements jerky, her face flushed an ugly mottled red beneath her carefully applied makeup. She wasn't just listing my recent exam failure. Oh no, this was a meticulously curated archive of every misstep, every perceived slight, every moment I hadn't lived up to her impossible, ever-shifting expectations. She dredged up the time I was 6 and accidentally broke that hideous porcelain vase her estranged sister had gifted her. A priceless heirloom, she'd called it then, though I knew for a fact it had gathered dust in the attic for years. She resurrected my ninth-grade detention for talking back to a history teacher who'd openly mocked my stutter. Apparently, that was proof of my inherent disrespect and rebelliousness. It was as if she'd kept a detailed ledger of my sins, each entry underlined in blood. My father, roused from his digital stupor by the escalating drama, finally decided to contribute more actively to my character assassination. He chimed in, his voice laced with a weary, resentful sigh that I'd always been a problem child, difficult from the moment I was born. He lamented how I was just like her brother, Uncle Rick, a man they both openly despised for his supposed irresponsibility and tendency to cause drama. Conveniently forgetting Rick was the only one who'd ever shown me genuine kindness. He even had the audacity to suggest I was a financial drain, just using them for food and a roof over my head, callously ignoring the part-time jobs I'd juggled since I was 16 to pay for my own clothes, books, and any semblance of a social life. He declared with absolute certainty that I'd never survive on my own, that the real world would chew me up and spit me out within a week. His words, though less theatrical than hers, were like tiny, ice-cold needles pricking at my already raw nerves. Something inside me, something I didn't even know existed, began to fracture. It wasn't a loud snap, more like the splintering of ancient ice. I tried to grab the exam paper back from her, not to argue the grade, but just to stop her from waving it in my face like a banner of my shame. Her reaction was instantaneous. She slapped my hand away with a sharp crack that echoed in the sudden, shocked silence. The sting on my skin was nothing compared to the burning humiliation that surged through me. I finally found my voice, a ragged, trembling whisper that was barely audible above the frantic thumping of my own heart. I told her to stop talking to me like that. She just laughed, a short barking sound devoid of any humor, her eyes glittering with a cruel triumph. She got right back in my face, her breath hot and smelling faintly of stale coffee and mints, daring me to leave. She sneered that I'd be back within a week, tail between my legs, begging for money, for forgiveness, for a place to crawl back to. That was it. The final thread of my composure didn't just snap, it vaporized. In a blind surge of rage and despair, I grabbed my phone, an old, already cracked model I'd bought with my own money, and hurled it against the kitchen wall. It hit with a sickening thud, bounced onto the tiled floor, the battery cover skittering away like a frightened insect. The screen, previously just a network of fine lines, now resembled a spiderweb of shattered glass. For a moment, everyone froze. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. Then, I turned, a single desperate thought consuming me. Get out! But as I reached for the door, my dad, his face a mask of cold fury, stepped directly in my path, arms crossed, a human barricade. He said, his voice low and menacing, that I wasn't going anywhere until I cleaned up my mess. And he didn't just mean the broken phone. He meant the mess I'd apparently made of their lives simply by existing. That's when the last vestiges of fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't a child anymore. I wouldn't be treated like one. I looked him dead in the eye, and for the first time, I didn't flinch. I just pushed past him, hard. He stumbled, surprised by my sudden strength, his eyes widening in disbelief, but he didn't try to stop me again. As my hand closed around the doorknob, my mom's voice shrieked from behind me, a final, venomous curse. She screamed that I'd better not even think about coming back, that this time I was out for good. The front door slammed shut behind me with a satisfying thud, a punctuation mark on 18 years of misery. Outside, the cool evening air hit my face like a physical blow, and I could still hear her yelling, her voice a distorted, ugly sound carried on the breeze. I didn't look back. I didn't even know where I was going. I had no plan, no money to speak of beyond the crumpled $20 bill in my wallet, just the clothes I was wearing and a soul that felt like it had been flayed open. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows as I walked, each step taking me further away from the only home I'd ever known. A home that had never truly been mine. Reaching the end of the block, I fumbled for my now mangled phone, relieved to find it still powered on despite the shattered screen. My fingers, clumsy and shaking, typed out a desperate one-line message to Atlas, my oldest, most reliable friend. Can I crash at yours tonight? Don't ask. I didn't want to explain, not yet. I just needed a place to hide, a place to breathe. I sank onto the cold, unforgiving curb, the distant glow of my old house visible down the street, my mother's enraged voice still a faint, haunting echo in the twilight. Was this freedom? Or had I just made the biggest mistake of my life? One thing was certain, I wasn't going back. Not after that, not ever. Atlas's apartment above the bakery, with its comforting scent of warm bread, was a stark contrast to the venom I'd escaped. He didn't ask questions when I appeared, disheveled and wild-eyed, just led me to his lumpy couch. His mom, Sarah, was out, a small mercy, as I wasn't ready for pity. My shattered phone still had enough life for my mother's first barrage of texts, misspelled curses, predictions of my demise on the streets, and finally, a lengthy complaint about the room I'd left messy, demanding repayment for every penny spent on me. Atlas just muttered for me to mute her. I did, the ensuing silence both liberating and terrifying. The next morning, my phone dead, Sarah found me. Her gentle eyes and quiet offer of coffee and toast were the kindest gestures I'd received in years. For a few hours, nobody asked anything. Bliss. But peace was fragile. School became an ordeal of whispers and stares. I kept my head down, focusing on my next move. Then my mother's public assault began. Social media became her battlefield. She tagged me in saccharine posts about mother-child bonds, juxtaposed with diatribes about ungrateful children. Her Facebook transformed into a shrine to her martyrdom. One post, a filtered photo of us from my awkward 12th year, read, "Praying for my lost boy to find his way back to the family who loves him unconditionally." The irony was a punch to the gut. Extended family started texting, parroting her concerns, asking why I was upsetting my poor mother. I sent back screenshots of her "wish I'd aborted you" text. That silenced some. A few aunts dismissed it as her just being angry, telling me not to take it personally. Right. My father remained a ghost, his silence a deafening complicity, always prioritizing appearances over the inferno at home. My mother had always resented me as the anchor to a life she despised, a bitterness she never let me forget. Surviving on Atlas's pity and his mom's toast, I knew this wasn't a temporary storm. A cold fury solidified within me. This was about survival. The school library computers became my command center. First, damage control. I meticulously changed every password, email, socials, the meager online banking I had. My mother's nosiness was legendary. I had to cut off her access. My ID, luckily in my old backpack, was key. Next, a new independent bank account. It held little, just crumpled bills from odd jobs, but it was mine. I sent a group text to trusted friends. If my parents called, give them nothing. Some thought I was being dramatic. I no longer cared. I was fighting for my sanity. One afternoon, a cousin, Paisley, who'd always been more perceptive than the rest, messaged me privately. She said she'd seen my mom's posts and the screenshots I'd sent out. She told me not to listen to the others, that she'd always known how my mom could be, and that she believed me. It was a small crack of light in the oppressive darkness, a reminder that not everyone was blinded by my mother's performance. It didn't change the war, but it gave me a sliver of hope that perhaps, somewhere, the truth could still find purchase. This small validation fueled my resolve. I wasn't just running anymore, I was starting to build my defenses. The next few weeks were a blur of whispered conversations in crowded school hallways, the sympathetic but ultimately helpless gaze of Atlas's mom, and the constant gnawing anxiety of an uncertain future. I threw myself into finding any odd job I could, stocking shelves at a dingy convenience store late at night, mowing overgrown lawns for a few bucks, anything to scrape together enough cash to not feel like a complete freeloader. Every dollar saved was a tiny victory, a small brick in the wall I was desperately trying to build around myself. The library became my sanctuary and my war room. Between shifts and homework, I researched how to truly sever ties, how to become an adult in the eyes of the law when your own parents treated you like a disposable inconvenience. The internet, for all its horrors, became a lifeline. Then came the phone call that pushed me from passive defense to active retaliation. It was a Saturday morning. I was at Atlas's, trying to fix his perpetually leaky faucet, when his home phone rang. Sarah answered. I could hear her polite, hesitant murmurings, and then, suddenly, her voice rising in disbelief. She walked into the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, her face pale. She mouthed, "Your mother," and handed me the receiver with an expression that was equal parts pity and alarm. I took a deep breath and brought the phone to my ear. At first, it was a torrent of crocodile tears, my mother's voice thick with feigned anguish, lamenting how I was out of control, how she was scared for my safety, how I had to come home, because I clearly had mental health issues and needed her. She painted a vivid picture of her sleepless nights, her broken heart, the neighbors supposedly whispering about her troubled son. It was a masterful performance, worthy of an Oscar. I listened in silence, my stomach churning with a familiar cocktail of rage and disgust. When she finally paused for breath, probably expecting me to break down and beg for forgiveness, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion, "I'm not coming back." The transformation was instantaneous. The tears vanished as if on cue. Her voice dropped the maternal concern and snapped back to its usual shrewish register. She started yelling again, accusing me of embarrassing her, of ruining the family's reputation, of being a selfish, ungrateful brat. She shrieked that if I didn't come home by Friday, she'd cut me off completely, sell all my remaining belongings. Not that there's much worth anything, you useless freeloader. And tell everyone I'd run off to join a cult. I just said, do it, and hung up. That was the moment something shifted irrevocably. If she was going to play dirty, then so was I. No more hiding, no more absorbing her poison. I started with the battlefield she'd chosen, social media. On one of her most recent public posts, a long, rambling essay about the sanctity of motherhood, complete with a cherubic baby photo of me, I left a simple, concise comment. Maybe try being nicer to your kid next time before you preach about unconditional love. Just a thought. She deleted it within 5 minutes, but not before several of her more gossipy friends had likely seen it. Then I started a quiet counter-campaign. I messaged a few of the more open-minded cousins, the ones who hadn't immediately drunk my mother's Kool-Aid, including Paisley. I gave them the unvarnished truth, complete with screenshots of my mother's most vile texts. Some believed me instantly, others were hesitant, but the seeds of doubt about my mother's victim narrative were sown. The important paperwork offensive began shortly after. My parents started texting me relentlessly about some urgent family financial matters, how my signature was crucial to help the family through a tough time. I knew their credit was probably shot. My dad had once, years ago, vaguely mentioned needing me to co-sign something for college loans I never even applied for. I ignored every single message. I wasn't about to let them drag me into their financial black hole or saddle me with debt. Their desperation grew. My mother, in a particularly unhinged voicemail, threatened to call the cops and report that I'd stolen valuables from the house. I calmly texted her back. If you even think about trying that, I will post every single hateful message you've ever sent me, every voicemail, every screenshot, for the entire world to see. Try me. I even sent her a photo of my student ID and my new P.O. box address. Not Atlas's, I wasn't that foolish. Just to prove I was alive, well, and not some runaway delinquent hiding in the shadows. She didn't reply to that one. My dad finally broke his silence after nearly a month. A curt three-word text, "We need to talk." I replied immediately. If it's about money or me signing anything, forget it. His response was predictable. I was being ungrateful, that family sacrifices for each other. I couldn't resist. Didn't seem like you sacrificed much when mom was wishing I was never born, except maybe your self-respect. He blocked me. Good. The first real crack in their united front appeared when Paisley messaged me a week later. She reported that things at my parents' house were getting ugly. They were apparently fighting constantly, the arguments loud enough for the neighbors to hear. My dad was sleeping in the guest room. My mom was simultaneously telling everyone I was lost and needed professional help, while also bad-mouthing my dad for not controlling me. The carefully curated facade of the perfect family was crumbling, brick by painful brick. People were starting to talk. Invitations to family gatherings were reportedly dwindling for my parents. The truth, it seemed, had a way of seeping through the cracks, no matter how frantically my mother tried to plaster them over with lies. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. And for the first time, it felt like I might actually have a chance. Years tumbled by, each one a layer of scar tissue over the raw wounds of my departure. 5 years, I'd carved out a life for myself. A fragile piece built on late nights, studying for a degree I was determined to get, grueling shifts at a series of thankless jobs, and the quiet solace of my tiny rented room. I wasn't thriving, not yet, but I was surviving, breathing air that wasn't poisoned by their resentment. I'd muted their numbers long ago, but never blocked them entirely. A morbid curiosity, perhaps, a desire to keep a distant, detached pulse on the slow decay of the life I'd escaped. Their occasional texts, mostly from my mother, demanding updates or issuing veiled threats around holidays, would flash on my screen unread before disappearing into the digital ether. I never replied. Not once. Then last month, the past clawed its way back with a vengeance. I was in my kitchen, attempting to assemble a cheap flat-pack bookshelf, surrounded by the mundane chaos of my independent life. My phone buzzed on the counter, a voicemail. I glanced at the screen, my dad's number. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, snaked its way down my spine. I hadn't heard his voice in half a decade. I let the notification sit there for hours, a ticking time bomb in my pocket before finally, reluctantly, pressing play. The voice that emerged was almost unrecognizable. Gone was the cold, dismissive authority. In its place was a broken, wheezing sound, heavy with what sounded like genuine, racking sobs. He said my name, his voice cracking, then mumbled something about needing to talk, about being sorry, so incredibly sorry. He said there were things I needed to know, things he should have said years ago, and could I please just call him back? It was surreal. I played it again, then a third time, a strange detachment washing over me. I texted Atlas, "Guess who just left me a crying voicemail?" His reply was a single, perfectly chosen meme. That's how we dealt with the ghosts of our past now. The next day, another voicemail. This time, my mother. No tears from her, just pure, unadulterated rage. She wasn't crying, she was spitting venom. She accused me of being petty, of actively ruining their lives, of abandoning them in their time of need. She hissed that if I didn't call them back immediately, I would regret it for the rest of my miserable existence. I deleted it without a second thought. But the seed of curiosity, planted by my father's broken voice, had taken root. I screenshotted the missed call from him and sent it to Paisley. Her reply was swift. "Yeah, things are getting really bad over there. Don't let them guilt you. Your mom's telling everyone you've abandoned them in their old age, but nobody's really buying her sob story anymore." She then proceeded to fill me in on the delightful details of their decline. After I'd left and made it clear I wouldn't be their financial safety net, their money situation had apparently nosedived. My dad, his pride probably taking a massive hit, had tried to refinance the house multiple times. But with my explicit refusal to co-sign anything and the credit alerts I'd wisely placed on my name years ago, the banks kept rejecting them. They had debts, not astronomical, but enough to cripple them when combined with their inability to manage money. My mother's lavish family holiday hosting? A distant memory. Nobody wanted to come anymore. Not after the truth about their perfect family had started to leak out. Thanks in no small part to the screenshots I'd strategically disseminated. Paisley painted a grim picture. My dad, increasingly isolated, even his own brother avoiding him. Their house, once my mother's meticulously kept shrine to suburban perfection, was literally falling apart. A leaky roof they couldn't afford to fix, a broken dishwasher, overgrown yard. My mother, too embarrassed to admit their financial ruin, let things slide into disrepair. The fights between them became legendary in the neighborhood, screaming matches that could be heard from the street, punctuated by slammed doors. Apparently, a neighbor had even called the cops once, worried about domestic violence. So, armed with this knowledge, I decided to call my dad back. Not out of pity, but out of a cold, clinical curiosity to see just how far they had fallen. He picked up on the first ring, his voice a reedy whisper. For a moment, there was just heavy breathing. Then, he launched into it. They were losing the house, he choked out. The bank was foreclosing. They had nowhere to go. He needed my help. He repeated his apologies. How he never should have let my mom say those things. How he should have protected me. He begged me to meet him just once, to talk about some important paperwork. I let him finish, then said, my voice flat and calm, if this is about money, Dad, forget it. I'm not signing anything. I'm not bailing you out. I could hear my mother start to shriek in the background, demanding he give her the phone. He tried to stammer something about family and sacrifice, but I cut him off. You didn't help me when I needed it. You made your choices. Now it's your turn to deal with the fallout. I hung up before my mother could snatch the phone and unleash another tirade. A few days later, a thick, official-looking envelope arrived at my P.O. box. It was from their bank, a formal request for me to co-sign a significant loan, a last-ditch attempt to salvage their sinking ship. They'd actually put my information down, hoping, I suppose, that 5 years of silence had softened me, that their crocodile tears had eroded my resolve. I took a photo of the letter. Then I composed a group text to every extended family member whose number I still had. I attached the photo of the bank's letter and wrote a short, to-the-point message. For anyone interested, this is what my parents' desperate voicemails were really about. They are trying to use my name for loans I will not be co-signing. Please do not ask me about this again. Paisley replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Most sent nothing, but the message was delivered. A week later, Paisley confirmed the inevitable. The bank had foreclosed. My parents had been forced to move into a cramped, rundown apartment on the worst side of town. My mother sent one final, hate-filled text, something about how I'd finally succeeded in ruining everything, and how she hoped I was happy. I didn't even feel the familiar sting of anger. I just felt nothing. I blocked her number. Done. The war was finally, truly over. The dust settled, not into a comfortable peace, but into a stark, echoing emptiness where a family used to be. There were no grand apologies that could mend the shattered pieces, no dramatic reunions. Life simply moved on, bifurcated. I saw my dad once, a few months after the foreclosure, from across a crowded supermarket aisle. He looked older, smaller, diminished, fumbling with a discount coupon. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. There was no recognition in his, or perhaps too much. He just looked away, a flicker of something unreadable. Shame. Regret? Crossing his face before he shuffled off towards the canned goods. I didn't approach him. There was nothing left to say. I simply continued with my shopping, the ghost of his presence fading as quickly as it had appeared. My mother remained a blocked number, a silent testament to a war won not by glorious battle, but by attrition and the cold, hard truth. I wasn't bitter anymore, not really. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind a strange, almost serene indifference. They wanted me to pay for their disappointment in life, for the choices they'd made. And in the end, they were the ones paying the ultimate price, living in the ruins of the life they'd so carelessly destroyed. I didn't break the law. I didn't seek revenge in the traditional sense. I just made sure they couldn't use me, couldn't break me, couldn't control my story any longer. If that made me the villain in their narrative, so be it. At least I wasn't the one leaving desperate, crying voicemails, begging for help from the child whose spirit they'd tried and failed to extinguish. I was moving on, building my own life, on my own terms, and I wasn't looking back.